Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Netflix Roulette. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
And today we're going to talk about Man on the Moon.
I'm cutting all of the baloney out of this review. In fact, this is the end of the review.
This is, of course, the Andy Kaufman biopic. And before we get started on this, I want to mention that Eric and I actually recorded this days ago. Something happened to the file. It was corrupted.
It was like a 45-minute review.
Yeah, and we were really happy with it, and we hate that we weren't able to post it. Now we have to re-record it. So we're going to do our level best to say as much as we can remember from what we were talking about before. And but we did think of a couple things we wanted to mention in that didn't get mentioned. So at least we'll have that.
We're probably just going to cherry pick our best lines, and it's just going to be incoherent to everyone else.
Yeah, you're going to have no idea. But we'll be like, oh yeah, remember that funny thing you said? Yeah. So the first thing I want to mention about this is that, especially for a biopic, I found this movie incredibly watchable. I thought this was really entertaining. I had a great time with it, and I was really impressed that being the life story of a real person, it's a comedy and it's funny.
I also think it's one of the best just thematic narratives as a biopic I've seen. This and probably Ed Wood are probably the two best biopics I've seen that work as just narrative stories.
Yeah, it works really well as a fiction.
Ed Wood's also pretty funny. It's also kind of a comedy.
I watched this with my wife, and she didn't know anything about Andy Kaufman.
I didn't know anything about Andy
Kaufman. I knew some things, but I didn't know a lot. I didn't even know exactly how he died, so I got to be somewhat surprised by the ending. But Sarah didn't know him at all, and she really enjoyed the movie. And so I think, and of course Eric said that too. And I think that this movie plays really well if you don't know who Andy Kaufman is, and that was the thing that kept me from watching it for the longest time. Is I always knew Andy Kaufman as this really strange performance artist who was a practical joker and did things that when people would tell me about them didn't seem funny. Then I watched this, and in the context of the movie, at least, I thought most of his stage jokes worked and were funny and totally played.
I think most of the stuff he did was funny. I don't know if I would have thought it was funny had I lived through it, but seeing it in context, a lot of it's genuinely funny. The TV thing is hysterical, where he wanted it to just flicker. That's absolutely hysterical. I don't think it would have been funny if I tuned in to watch an Andy Kaufman program and it just flickered, but seeing that he wanted it, that's funny.
Well, and I think that that's a testament to how well the film is working, again, as a traditional narrative. We are in this guy's head, even though we can't 100% understand the guy. And so what I mean by that is we get to see what he thinks is funny and make the determination for ourselves if we think it's funny. So we're led into the joke a lot of the time. But then, happily, there are places where we get to get into other people's heads, like Danny DeVito's character, like the agent. And we don't know, for instance, the first time that we see Tony Clifton, that he really is Andy Kaufman. At least, if you don't know anything about Andy Kaufman,
right.
you would know that.
There's a lot of that in this film where, like, it plays a certain way, and, like, I feel like if I knew Andy Kaufman, a lot of this would have been more, like, I would know where it was going. But because I didn't know anything, it felt like a really, like, twisty, turny movie. I'm like, oh, they were working together. Oh, I see.
I bet for some people this played for nostalgia before anything else, where it's like, oh yeah, I remember that, and I remember that.
I remember when Andy Kaufman wrestled women and called them lesser.
Right, yeah, and of course just Taxi in general, and the one of his two most famous things, just like stage jokes, singular stage jokes, not counting the wrestling thing and all of that, were the Elvis Presley bit and then the Mighty Mouse bit,
right?
Both of which are hysterical in the movie.
Yeah, well, he has this great stage thing where he plays really uncomfortable, and then he does something truly, genuinely funny, and it makes it funnier.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell when the actual man is nervous and uncomfortable and when it's an act.
That's something really interesting throughout the film.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get the impression he's being the real guy, and sometimes I can't tell. And then there's that line when he's lying in bed with his wife where he says something, and then she responds with, there is no real you. He goes, oh yeah, that's right. And I thought that was really revealing and really interesting. I think this might be the only time I've seen a biopic that's a genuine character study. Um,
I mean, I feel like I've seen some others. I feel like Ray kind of was a character
I'd
study.
never seen Ray.
Oh, okay, I liked it quite a bit, but that's neither here nor there.
I well, and as you said, when you pick this, I'm not a huge fan of biopics. This has some of the shortcomings of certain of biopics. There's the timeline is really hard to follow. Sometimes like it feels like he wrestled for years, and I don't think he did. Like I'm sure it's probably like a 6 month period, but because we spend so much time on it in the film, it feels like it takes a long time, or that he did it for a long time. So there's a weird, and then we keep making, like, they will drop references to things like Taxi, where like I didn't even realize he was still on Taxi when it got canceled. Um, because they fired Tony Clifton, and I thought that was his way of getting fired. And then later they're like, "Oh, we canceled Taxi." I was like, "He was still on that?" So it's got some of those issues. Obviously, the big one is, um, all of a sudden he's like happily dating a woman, and then like all of a sudden they're married.
Well, were they actually married?
I thought they got married because I'm pretty sure she's referred to as his wife.
See, yeah, I was confused about that too because there's that scene where he's like, "Let's move in together," and that's very close to the end of the
I
movie.
thought that was a joke.
No, no, that wasn't a joke because she was really surprised by it, and they have that really touching moment where he's singing to her and then they're kissing. I mean,
I thought they already lived together and he was joking.
no, because then we see them actually like moving boxes and things later,
Oh,
like they're
maybe.
moving in
Well,
together. Yeah,
because when because he wrestles her, and then the next time you see her, he says, "Well, I'll pick you out of the crowd and I'll propose to you. I'll say I'll propose. I'll marry the first woman that can pin me, and I'll let you pin me." So
right.
I
But
kind
they
of
didn't actually get married.
I think they're married at the by the time of the funeral. I think they're married. I
Okay,
feel like she is referred to as his wife. I could be wrong.
I would have to actually do some research. I can't get it from the movie.
Yeah, and there's some of that. It's not as bad as certain biopics, but there's definitely some of that kind of timeline jumping around. And I think part of it is because obviously it's not exactly what happened. They're moving some things around, so it's probably a little bit ambiguous in certain aspects, just by the nature of moving actual history around.
Yeah.
Um, but I gotta say, I came away from this movie loving Andy Kaufman. Really, really not. I won't say I agree with him or even that I get him, but I think he's fascinating. Um, I mean, assuming that this is pretty accurate to life and character.
Right.
Um,
Well, and at the very least, we know for sure just from the history that all of the stuff about him, about what he finds funny being, and also what he finds entertaining for himself, is messing with an audience and making them think things that aren't really going on. I really enjoyed all the stuff about, and I guess found fascinating all the stuff about how he didn't care what kind of reaction he got from an audience. He just wanted a reaction. One of the things that he finds most successful is when he goes to that college and reads The Great Gatsby.
we didn't mention that last time when we recorded
No,
it before. That is hysterical. I
and
thought that was
there's like six
such a
people left in the audience at the end of it, and he leaves it, and he thinks it's a win,
yeah, that was well because he got a reaction. Most people got up and left.
and he likes that.
I thought that was hysterical. That they wanted him to do his character from Taxi, and he just walks backstage, says, "Give me the book," and then he starts reading, and he reads like one line in his Taxi character, and then just goes back to reading it. Like again, if I was there, I would be angry.
Oh yeah,
But
and you can totally understand all the people in the audience that
oh,
were.
absolutely. But actually seeing it, like from his side, it's genuinely really funny.
I think it's interesting too seeing the gags he does on stage that actually pay off for an audience and the ones that don't, because I think that's completely by accident. He's doing what he thinks will get a reaction from an audience, and again, he doesn't care what kind it is. So when he does the Mighty Mouse thing and when he does the Elvis thing, those both pay off for an audience in a great way, and they give him standing ovations at the end. And those are two of his simplest things. And he starts getting more and more grandiose as he gets more and more famous, because he's afraid that he can't surprise his audience anymore. And he has that great foreshadowing line where he says, I don't know how to surprise them anymore, short of faking my own death or setting the stage on fire.
Right.
And that's why the bit at the very end where somebody else presumably is being Tony Clifton a year later works so well, because, and also why the cancer thing is such a Boy Who Cried Wolf moment,
Yeah.
because he's even considered that before.
I actually thought that quote was kind of funny. Because there's a comedian, not so much comedian anymore. He mostly makes movies now, named Bobcat Goldthwait,
Okay.
and he lit the Tonight Show couch on fire.
Really?
Yeah, and when he said that line, I was like, I wonder if I bet you Bobcat Goldthwait was inspired by Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were. It's just a matter of pushing envelopes and showing people things they'd never seen before, and then experimenting with is the reason no one has ever done this before because it's not worth
A
doing.
vast virus database has been updated.
You'll have to forgive me. I just got a new computer, and it does that. It talks to me
That would have
now.
been really funny if you had the pirate Skype or the pirate Avast.
I'm, I'm vast, matey. Your Avast is updated. Anyway, what was I talking
You were
about?
talking
Oh,
about people being inspired by Andy Kaufman.
yeah, and so the experiment is to try things, throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, and figure out what things have never been done before. Because Andy says at the very beginning, I do this because like when he's doing the Barnyard Animal song, and he says, I do this because it's never been done before. But then the question you have to ask yourself is that because it's not worth doing,
Or
or
because
is
it's
it
not
because no
funny.
one's thought of it? And then it really can be funny. Like no one would take the risk, so Andy Kaufman is taking the risk.
Right.
And I think that's what people that really like him. I think that's what they like him most for, is that he was really ballsy and willing to try weird things and take these huge risks.
Yeah. Um, I he was such a sorry, I had something in my eye. He was such a
Avast.
yeah, no, he was such like he didn't he almost has no self-respect, and I don't mean that in a negative way. He was willing to do whatever it took to get a reaction. Like he wanted to be the biggest star on the planet. And like, he says short of faking his own death, I would say it's almost short of like murdering someone and like, doing it on screen. I like, there are some boundaries, I guess legally speaking, but like really he is willing to do anything to become famous or more famous or stay famous. Um,
Yeah, importantly, and he pushes this line to a degree, but importantly, he never really hurts anyone.
right.
And most of the
He
and
hurts
most of the
people's
people,
feelings.
yeah, but most of the people, even that you think he's hurt their feelings the hardest, it turns out they were in on the joke. Most of them.
Right.
The big exception to that is, of course, the woman that becomes his girlfriend, and he actually kind of feels bad about that, or at least it seems like he feels
And
bad
then they
about that.
cut to, them being together, and I don't really know what happened there.
Right. Well, again, there is that scene where she shows up to a movie theater and says, "I can't believe you called me." We do see the first time they go on a date together.
Oh, is that her? Like, I must have
Yeah,
missed
that's
that.
her. Because she's like, "You're the last person on earth I thought would call me," and then that's when he wants to take her to get married. That's all real fast. They don't have a relationship before that happens.
I want, I wonder how that played out in real life.
Yeah, so do I.
Um,
Um, Getting back to the production side of it, Jim Carrey loses himself completely in this role. To the point, I read up on this a little bit. To the point where he stayed in character between scenes most of the time on set,
really?
and got and made some people angry over it, and got in a had kind of a problem with Jerry Lawler, who actually plays himself, the wrestler. He actually plays himself in the movie, and there's apparently on set. What happened was they had some animosity toward each other from the very beginning because Jim Carrey, I guess early on in the production, like forgot a line, and that really ticked off Jerry Lawler.
Really?
And so they didn't like each other on the set very well. And then staying in character at one point, between the scenes, Jim Carrey actually spit on him, which was something that Andy Kaufman actually did to Jerry Lawler in 1982. And he grabs Jim Carrey, puts him in a hold, and allegedly sent him into the hospital.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, he completely lost himself in this role, and it
It's
shows on
oh, it
screen.
shows.
And Eric, I think this is maybe Jim Carrey's best performance.
I think I don't think this is his best film. I think that's still Truman Show. I
I
think
agree with you.
this is the best performance I've ever seen from him. I
And I also like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind a lot.
still haven't seen it.
Oh, okay, okay.
It
Oh, really?
it's on
Wow.
my eternal to see list.
Well, it's on Netflix.
I know it's actually
But
in my instant queue.
oh, okay. But yeah, it's funny because I've seen most of Jim Carrey's movies, at least most of his Star Vehicle movies.
Yeah,
the
there's a
things that-
couple of like obscure ones, like where he plays that gay guy. That I
I
haven't
haven't
seen.
seen that. I haven't seen Lemony Snicket.
I
There's some
saw
stuff I
Lemony
don't.
Snicket. It's not bad.
Okay, I never saw
He
that.
doesn't lose
But
himself in the performance, but
for it's crazy that I'd never seen this because I've always considered myself a Jim Carrey fan, and I really enjoyed doing this for this show and getting to see what I think is Jim Carrey's crowning performance.
yeah, it's really like, as someone that kind of grew up with Jim Carrey, even in his more serious roles, you still kind of see he's always Jim Carrey. Even in things like The Truman Show, he still does the Jim Carrey the faces and the sounds and he just there's just Jim Carreyisms to him. There's none of that here. There's not a
No,
single moment where he does a Jim Carrey face or
no, it's all
sound
Andy
or
Kaufman,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, I mean, and I think from the very beginning, I was immediately impressed with how he got spot on that really crazed, like jiggly googly eye thing
Oh yeah, the
that Andy
eyes. The
Kaufman
eyes are
does.
really cool. He's
If you can't do that, you can't play that role.
right.
But yeah, it's fascinating because Jim Carrey is such a recognizable face. He has such a recognizable voice. He's so easily to caricature, and for me to lose Jim Carrey while watching a movie and be thinking that's Andy Kaufman on screen, that is impressive.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Jim Carrey is one of the most recognizable people in film, probably at least of our generation. Um, and to have him do a performance where I was watching this and Priscilla was just kind of bobbing in and out, and she was watched a couple of minutes here and there, and she was like, it took her a good 2-3 minutes. She was like, is that Jim Carrey? Which is really impressive because there's no makeup in this.
Yeah, he's got different hair, but that's it.
Yeah. It's kind of that thing of like, just he completely changes his mannerisms. Like, he doesn't move like himself.
And the entire movie is well cast.
Oh,
I get the feeling watching this that for the people involved in making it, it was very much a labor of love. I got the impression from a lot of people, especially because so many of the actors in the movie had worked with or at least met Andy Kaufman.
I actually found out the character that Paul Giamatti plays, his friend.
Yeah.
He wrote a book, which I guess is partially the basis for the film, and he was on set as in an advisory position.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that adds a certain authenticity to it. I just think that it's neat stunt casting to have Danny DeVito in this movie at all, because Danny DeVito was on Taxi, and he was the boss on Taxi. And so I kept feeling from his performance that he really wanted to be there. Like there was just this air I got from Danny DeVito that this was an important project for him.
Yeah.
And also, I really enjoyed his character.
I think he represents the audience and maybe everyone that ever met Andy Kaufman, because he kind of goes on the same journey that you do, where you're like, okay, this guy's weird, and then kind of slowly coming around to, but he's really kind of interesting and he's funny. What he's
Yeah.
doing is really funny when you look at it in a certain light.
Well, and the only difference between him and the regular audience is that he sees something in Andy Kaufman that nobody else would ever have
Right.
before, probably, before he makes him a star. I mean, like he offers him representation the night he meets him.
Yeah, I wonder if that was sped up. Like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I wonder that too. I'd like to read up some more on Andy
I
Kaufman.
would like to read the book that the guy that Paul Giamatti plays wrote about Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, I was really impressed with a lot of the Taxi stuff, and it took me back a little bit because I watched Taxi some growing up, and it was really fun to kind of re-experience some of that. But also, it was just impressive how real it all looked, how authentic it all looked. And Christopher Lloyd is briefly in this in a number of places, and he looks like he did back then. I don't know how they did that. There were some places where I kept thinking they must just be cutting away to shots of him actually on the set of Taxi, but then he's at the funeral. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was Christopher Lloyd. There are a number of actors in this movie that are playing themselves, or real people playing themselves, who are of course quite a bit older now than they were when this movie was made in I think '98, and so they're at least 10, 12, 15 years older than they were, and they all look really great. And it's neat that they didn't get actors to play everybody. Like I'm glad that we actually had Letterman in this, and I don't mind that he looks a little different. Like they didn't try to make him look like he had the longer hair and stuff, and that was okay with me,
Right.
because it looked more real. It's not exactly period perfect, but it probably is better than if he was wearing a wig or something.
Yeah. Um,
So I really enjoyed all that stuff. I liked getting to see the early late '70s Saturday Night Live set and stuff like that.
I really liked all the Saturday Night Live stuff. I thought there was a really just I'm I'm really interested just in old Saturday Night Live. From a kind of conceptual aspect. Because nothing like that ever really existed before then. Um, so I really enjoyed seeing a lot of that. I wish there was a little bit more of the Saturday Night Live cameos like there was with Taxi. Um,
I don't think there could have been because he wasn't a regular on that show. I mean, you remember when we first see him, he's billed as musical guest, and when he tries to get back on the show again later, I don't know how often he appeared on it in the interim.
right,
He wasn't on there all the time like he was Taxi.
right. Um, and I guess we should talk about this being the lightest and softest R I've ever seen.
Yeah, it really is. There is a little bit of nudity, not a lot to speak
There's
of, and
one scene where there's two prostitutes and they don't have tops on. That's it.
yeah, and I felt like it was part. I felt like they were trying to earn their R with that scene because they very easily could have shot that a different way without it seeing anything.
There's that, and then they drop an
Yeah,
F-bomb a couple of times.
there's like three.
Yeah, it's not like this film literally you could take, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds out of this film and it would be a PG-13. It's the softest R I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I sort of hated the little bit of that stuff that we got because this is almost family friendly.
Yeah, yeah.
It's quirky and it's weird and there
And
are
obviously there's some adult kind of ideas when you get to the end, but not any more than you would see in a lot of films.
sure, no, no, and yeah, I mean there's a lot of there's adult themes, but not like adult, you know.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's yeah. Um,
There's stuff you don't see in every quote unquote family friendly film, like you know, like you know, most really family friendly movies don't have a whole lot of stuff going on about like holistic medicine and stuff.
yeah.
But
Well, and I do want to say my favorite scene in the entire movie is near the end. When Andy Kaufman goes to the miracle worker and he sees that it's fake, and he just starts laughing.
what a great point, because that's been his whole life.
Yeah, yeah. It's
And
such an
also, it's like
emotional.
it's like it reaffirms his worldview,
It's
because he even says early on, in fact, when he gets thrown out of the holistic medicine camp, he says, "I see the world as non-existent,"
right.
and it's kind of just this place where that he can mess with it, and he says, I don't think that we living in that world should take ourselves too seriously. And then the lady that runs the place comes back with, we don't think you believe in anything, or I'm sorry, that you don't respect anything.
Right, which is something like comedians talk about, where they're, you can't do that when you're a comedian. There's nothing sacred, kind of a thing. Um,
Yeah, and it seems like by the end, the thing he respects the most is the ability to make people think things.
yeah. Um, but I wonder with that scene where he goes to the doctor. That scene seems really thematically perfect. I wonder if that really happened.
Yeah, there's a lot of things like that that I kind of wonder about. And I appreciate that the movie opens up in almost this kind of meta fourth wall breaking
Oh,
way.
it's not almost. It's totally fourth wall breaking.
Yeah, of basically saying, yeah, biopics for dramatic effect change all kinds of things around, and this is not going to be Andy Kaufman's real life. I have potentially an extreme kind of way of looking at that scene, and tell me if you agree with this, Eric. This is maybe an odd interpretation, but I kind of think that really funny, strange opening of Andy Kaufman saying, "This is my movie and it's bad and I cut everything out of it." Um, I think that's the one place in the film that we're seeing Jim Carrey. I think that is Jim Carrey as Andy Kaufman talking to us.
Um, maybe.
Because it plays with the ideas of the theme of the film so well, that like the whole thing is a mirage.
I I
You know,
I
just like Andy Kaufman kept creating these elaborate fake kind of set pieces, and they always turn out not to be real. It's like this too is a construction.
well, something I was reading after we saw this was that um all of the Taxi stuff, according to people who worked on Taxi, is not true. They're like, he was really good. He was completely professional. These are all stories fabricated by his friend, the one that Paul Giamatti plays. He goes, but I think Andy would have loved his version of the events. And I wonder if that's maybe part of this movie, is like, maybe that's kind of
Yeah,
what they're saying up front, is like, look, we changed it a little bit, but this is kind of
like
how he would like to be remembered, type of thing.
yeah, maybe Andy himself would have wanted this to be somewhat of a fabrication.
Right.
That he wouldn't have, because of the way he lived his life. This is not a guy who would be interested in having his whole life be portrayed exactly the way it was. That's not what he was about. He liked interpretation, and he liked making people react in different ways. So it's in the same way that Andy Kaufman created all these different characters. Jim Carrey is creating a character that is kind of Andy Kaufman, but because of the nature of biopics, he can't be at 100% Andy Kaufman. So it's almost like, in a way, this is kind of the perfect thing to make a biopic about, because it's a commentary on the very nature of these kinds of things,
Yeah.
and I just think that's really cool.
Yeah, no, I thought this was one of the strongest biopics I've ever seen. This is up there with Ed Wood for me for best biopics.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason it's such a good biopic is because it gets to get away with not being a good biopic.
Yeah.
Because again, it comes right out and says, "Yeah, we move things around. We're trying to make a good movie here."
Yeah.
And Andy Kaufman did exactly the same thing. He's like I can't be totally authentic all the time, or maybe any of the time. And part of that's an insecurity thing, I think. Just my interpretation of the man. Part of that, I think, is somebody saying, "I don't know who I am, so I portray all these different characters because I am a different person for every occasion."
Right.
And that's really interesting. The Tony Clifton thing is funny, and
Again, only if you know the joke. Like, I feel like if I'd went to see
who's
him,
there? Oh yeah, it'd be awful.
um,
He immediately reminded me of Plinkett from Red Letter Media.
you told me that, and I didn't think of that when I watched it, but it totally is.
And it makes me wonder if they didn't if they weren't thinking of Andy Kaufman when they came up with that character, because his voice is pretty close.
Can I tell you that this film really made me see other things? Be like, I wonder if they're an Andy Kaufman fan. I wonder if that's an Andy Kaufman reference, with a lot of like just different things.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because not you having not known anything about the man, it's interesting how you get to go back and watch this and go, wow, I didn't know this guy permeated the culture this much.
Yeah, yeah. I knew he was a person, and I vaguely recognized the name. I didn't even know he was on Saturday Night Live. Um, so I really I was really impressed with this film. I think this might be the best pick you've had so far on Netflix Roulette.
Yeah, I mean, not that that's real hard or anything. Well, I'm not gonna say this is better than Odd Couple.
Um, it's completely different.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, like, I think I would go back to Odd Couple before I would go back to this, but I would go back to this.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
I also wanted to mention, real quick, that part of the reason that I immediately latched onto this movie, I like the whole atmosphere of this thing worked and was in my sensibilities a lot because I'm a huge REM fan.
Right.
And I immediately assumed that this being called Man of the Moon, it was going to have REM music in it. I didn't realize it was going to have quite as much as it did, and I think that was a great, audio aesthetic for it.
Yeah, I'm not really an REM fan, so.
Well, fine, but I love REM, so there. Anyway, so Eric, I guess you have our pick for next time.
Yes, next time we are watching a film from 1984 uh, called Dreamscape. It is it's a film that got tossed around a lot when Inception came out. It's a film about people who go inside other people's dreams and steal things. Um,
If I'm not mistaken, I think this is going to be the second film from 1984 we've done because I think Final Countdown was
I
1984.
thought Final Countdown was 79, but I might be wrong. Um,
Oh, I don't remember.
Dreamscape stars Dennis Quaid and Max von Sydow. Uh,
Oh no, it was 80. It was 80.
okay.
Anyway, sorry.
All right. Well, yeah. So that's what we're watching next week. Um, I'm kind of interested to know how many people actually watch the movies that we watch, and how many people just kind of listen to the videos.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know that too. Because yeah, I know we definitely have some people that watch these along with us, and it seems like we always have at least several people who have already seen the things that we're talking about, even when they're more obscure.
Yeah. Well,
I was surprised by
I'm
the
sure
number of people that
everybody's seen something. So
yeah, I was really surprised by the number of people that even knew what Final Countdown was.
yeah, I was too. I said something to my stepfather one day about Final Countdown. He's like, "Oh yeah, I saw that." I was like, "Really?"
Yeah. So anyway, if you want to watch the next one with us, it's Dreamscape, and we will be doing that next week. And thanks as always for listening. I'm Captain Logan,
And I'm Eric.
and we'll see you next time.